Thank you. And we have stopped recording. Welcome to the September 5th work session of the Webster Grove City Council. Talk about your time. We, as usual, will start with some board and commission interviews, and we will start. John Sauter, I see that you are on Zoom. John is interviewing for the business owner vacancy on the Business Development Commission. And so we'll just let you be a panelist with us. I think you're getting promoted as we speak.
Would be coming over. There he is.
There we go. Hello, John. So I think you've been on this commission before, maybe, so you probably know the drill, but we're just going to ask you to tell us a little bit about why you'd like to serve on the BDC and what you think you might bring to the commission. And then if members up here have questions for you, we'll ask after that.
Okay. First off, thanks for interviewing me. I appreciate all your time. I haven't been on the Business Development Commission before, but I've been interested for quite a while. I have been on the Old Webster Trade Association as a treasurer, and I was a very involved participant there for 5-6 years. I'm still sit on some of the committees there, but my wife and I own Leopard Boutique in Old Webster Groves, and have for over 10 years. I really love this community. We have moved to Shrewsbury, and hopefully someday we're on the border. Hopefully someday we'll get into Webster. But my kids go to Bristol and love it there, and we just love this community. And in that vein, I have always been involved with the trade association and more interested in getting involved with developing business relationships and promoting businesses in the city. I'm very aware of the uniqueness of Webster Groves and its situation as a community that also has businesses. I would like to be a part of drawing the vision of that for the future and making it something that where the community and businesses can work together to have a successful community.
Thank you very much, John. Do we have questions for John?
Not for me.
None for me.
Right. John, just so you know, we have one more interview scheduled at our next meeting. So you're not going to hear immediately from us about this. We're going to hold that over until the next meeting. But thank you, and glad you're interviewing, glad for your interest, and we would let you know as soon as we finish the process.
Okay, thanks again for your time. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
I swear I pressed it. Thank you very much, John. All right, next we have Brian Bergfeld, who is interviewing for the Historic Preservation Commission, which has 2 vacancies. And Brian, we'll just ask you to come up here to the microphone. And the questions are the same. Why would you like to do this? And what do you think you'll bring to the commission? And you might push that microphone up just a little bit if you can. Okay. There you go.
Well, again, yeah, thanks for this opportunity. But it's pretty simple. For me, the Historic Preservation Commission kind of says it all. Like, I'm interested in preserving history. I have an interest in archaeology and history, and I have no like experience in that, just an interest. I'm a physician by training. I've lived in Webster for like 20 years. And I just look at the houses around here and I just love what I see. That's why we moved here partially. And I'd like to preserve it, or at least before we destroy buildings, kind of know the historical context of why this was here or what was here. And do we need to save it or not? You know, that kind of stuff. I really became interested in this commission when the Listrong housing thing kind of came through in one of the city council meetings. I thought that's awesome, and I want to be a part of that. So
Great. Questions?
Thank you for your interest.
sure.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we will be back in touch with you very quickly.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
All right. Is that it then?
That's it.
Pretty
See,
good.
told you we'd try and make it kind of easy on you.
Thank you.
We have some appointments to announce when we get to that point in the meeting. And then we'll talk about reappointments as well, because I think we only have, yeah, that's it for interviews, but we'll talk about appointments at the end. I usually skip ahead, but we'll do it at number 5 where it really is on the agenda. Does anyone have anything that they would like to talk about on the regular agenda? No, then we will start with updates. And today we're going to do this differently. We're going to start with Pam because she's got a list. So go for
How's
it.
that different?
Well, usually I start at one end or the other.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Sustainability Commission met in late August, and this was the first time Sean Finnegan, who's our new sustainability coordinator, attended the meeting. She began working in August or late July, and she's here for 20 hours a week. And so she seems to be on top of everything, and Jamie did a very good job updating her and getting her up to speed on all of the initiatives. And then also beginning, we've got our intern in place for the greenhouse gas inventory, and that is a master's student from SIU Edwardsville. And Sean is working with them to get going on that for our city. Coming up, the big project this fall is Grow Solar. And this is related to our micro grants that we've talked about doing for homeowners that want to take advantage of new solar power in their homes or EV charging in for their vehicles. But this is Grow Solar. It's essentially a homeowners group that will be buying collectively in order to drive down costs by selecting one vendor. And so we have power hours coming up in September and October, which will include virtual events as well as in-person events and a house tour. And I'll have more updates on that at our next meeting. And then also finally with them, we have the Eco Ed series, which will be September 21st, and Eric Hayes from Hickson Middle School will be presenting for that. BDC met on August 24th, and Mr. Peterson presented information about the various types of taxing and improvement districts. And this came about as a result of some of the members asking about how we can help those businesses that are not in taxing districts become more integrated with in our business community. And then last Wednesday, we had the second networking coffee at the Recplex, and that was well attended. And that will begin kind of our regularly every 6-month business coffees. And then finally, over the past couple of weeks, I had the pleasure of spending a couple of days helping Laura with some of our community members. I went to present a congratulations to Ray Byerly Sr. He's the owner of B&L Service Station on Elm, and he has been in business in Webster for 50 years. That's quite notable. I also attended the retirement party for Maddie Tate, who was a longtime employee at Straub's in Webster. That was a lot of fun, amazing turnout for her retirement. And then I also made a quick stop and visited with the Daughters of the American Revolution at the library, and they are pulled together a display for Constitution Week, which will be next week. I think it starts on the 17th. And that is it.
If I may take a moment before you go, Emerson, to say thank you very much for covering all of those things for me. And I encourage the rest of you to sometime when they're available, and I'll let you know. It's really fun sometimes to go out and do some of this stuff. So, but thank you very much, Pam.
You're welcome. It was great. It was a good time.
You got anything else you can share?
Oh, not on the city front.
Not on
I'm
the
always
city.
willing to share, but not.
Not for recorded
oh.
consumption in the public of Webster Road.
Update on both of the business districts, Old Orchard or Webster. They're getting ready for the Christmas holidays. So they're preparing to get those things in line. Also, I did attend, I can remember the name now, a evening event that displays it features some of our kids at the high school. They went over to China. And so that was very, very good. I found I knew more people than I did, and it was good hearing their feedback on how much they enjoyed that trip. In 24, yes, China's coming here. So they're gonna be looking for individuals to sponsor or either provide housing for those students when they come over. So feel free to get that information to them. The Webster Rock Hill Ministries, we're starting our holiday planning now to adopt families. So if you can probably go out there, look at our website, should be out there by now, what we're going to be doing. So adopt a family, provide Thanksgiving and Christmas for them. And also the Webster Rock Hill Ministry will be doing Bush Stadium Rock Hill Ministries Day at the ballpark on September the 17th at 1:15 p.m. So they have tickets at the ministries for you to purchase. And all of the, not all the proceeds, but most of the proceeds go to, excuse me, to the Webster Rock Hill Ministries.
Nice.
I think that is all I have.
All right.
I don't have any updates from commissions, but I did want to at least acknowledge the concerns that we've heard from the public about the sign destruction and vandalism that's occurred in the last, or that occurred a couple weeks ago. I don't have updates on it. I would love to hear some if we have any, but I know that rattled a lot of folks that to see that happen here, and it seems like things are escalating a little bit from just the anonymous letters now. So a concern for sure.
Thank you very much. Karen, do you have anything for us?
I'd just like to, at the Parks and Rec meeting, was a lot of really good conversation around the pool and just the support for an indoor pool. I couldn't see, I was on Zoom, so I don't know who the gentleman was that was speaking, but he had attended our previous council meeting and did a great job at pretty much trying to explain and address the questions around how, and Scott did, along with Scott, about how we voted on the pool going forward, basically to go with as is, but with the potential for indoor down the road. There's concern with that, but both Scott and the gentleman that was speaking, and I don't know if Scott is in or on and can tell me his name because I couldn't see him, but he was very clear that while we communicated support, the biggest hurdle is the 200K plus maintenance of the pool. And there was just a lot of good conversation around it. Even in terms of, have we considered an additional bond to do it, even talking about sponsorship. And again, Scott made sure that it was clear that even with some type of sponsorship, there had to be a question of sustainability. How could that go on? Because the big question was not as much the cost of building as much as the maintenance cost. So just to reiterate, just a lot of interest around that, a lot of conversation around it. And then, in addition to the letters that we've been getting, there's just a tremendous amount of support for the pool, indoor pool, even additional consideration for supporting the cost of an indoor facility. So
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Like Mayor, I will say I've spoken to quite a few community individuals about the enclosure for the pool, and basically when I explained the entire scope of it, what was included, then they understood. It's just not putting the pool there, you have to maintain it. So I would say each and every one of those conversations I had left in a positive manner.
Yeah.
That just building it is still have to be maintained,
Yeah.
and that's what we're working with. So.
Okay, thank you. David?
The Traffic Advisory Commission met last week. They approved a proposed ordinance or suggestion for a proposed ordinance related to on-street parking, particularly around institutions such as Webster High and Webster University. They have now requested an opportunity to present to council come October, November of 2023. So that will be coming forward to you all here shortly. They've spent a lot of time in deliberating and listening to public comment and public emails about these concerns. And I think they've come up with a pretty equitable and fair resolution here. I think the determination will be whether we have an appetite to do it and also whether we have the ability to actually enforce anything that comes down the road.
All right, thank you. Emily?
So the Green Space Advisory Commission met and we talked about lots of projects. We went through a lot of things. It's a good recording if people want to see it. We welcomed a new member, Emily Horton, so we kind of did a debrief of all the projects that are going on. Probably the one soonest approaching is the Leave the Leaves for the fall. And then Historic Preservation met and welcomed a new board member there with Hillary Perkins. And I think that the next kind of special project that group is going to work on is exploring this idea of conservation districts and what might be possible and how that might be able to apply in Webster. The 9/17 Cardinals game is also Gibbons night at the ballpark. So I will
Excellent.
be there.
We'll send Gibbons over to buy all of our tickets. It'll be just fine.
Actually, people are going to compare price now and see which.
I think our price is about $30. And
And
really,
so-
really good seats too.
And Gibbons is Webster Rock Hill too. So,
Yeah, there you
so it's
go.
kind of a nice convergence there. And then we've got the Missouri Municipal League coming up next week.
Great.
Looking forward to.
Anything from the clerk?
Yes,
Excellent.
I would like to introduce our new part-time deputy city clerk, Shella Bradley. And you'll be appointing her this evening. And I think she's happy to be here, right? I'm sure.
Well, welcome. We are very happy to have you. And I think I've said that almost every time I've seen you. So at some point it'll wear off, but in the meantime, I'm sure everyone else will say the same to you. So welcome. I skipped the city attorney.
No, you didn't skip me. I have nothing to say. I
Okay.
have no updates.
And city manager.
Too. So a reminder that Jazz Fest is coming up Saturday, September 16th. And so excited to share. Council already knows this, but we officially have Wi-Fi in City Hall. So it's here. It's real. It's here.
I'm
It
having
alerts
trouble
us.
getting on it. I
Oh,
tried.
no.
Okay, we're not troubleshooting in the meeting.
Not to help us.
It works. It's here. So really excited about that for our community members and of course our staff.
Great.
That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I do have a few. Arts Commission met this morning. 2 projects they're working on is replacing the City of the Arts banners and working on a program whereby arts organizations in the city can sponsor a banner and actually have their logo, picture, something like that on the banner. In addition, working on the Lifetime Achievement in the Arts, which I'm not going to say who it is because I'm not sure we've publicly announced it, but it's going to be great. And for the first time, we're going to do that celebration outside in the fall. So look forward to the dates on that. I'm not going to say anything about the Charter Review Advisory Board because Jeannie Kirkton is going to join us later and really tell us a lot about what's been going on there. Dr. Peoples and I attended the regional mayors meeting that was put on by Metro Mayors and the St. Louis Municipal League. And I think we had 6 or 7 state legislators there. I think the things that cities are concerned about that got sort of beaten back last year are pretty much all going to come back. I also today was at the St. Louis Municipal League's Legislative Affairs Committee meeting. I will circulate probably later this week their list of what they would like to be the priorities of the St. Louis Municipal League in front of the legislature to be. And any comments that you have, I'm happy to take back to that committee before the executive board decides whether to send that on to the membership. I do want to also say something about the burned Black Lives Matter and the burned trans inclusion flag incidents of the last well, I guess it's been 10 days, 2 weeks now since that happened. And I do want to, on behalf of myself and whoever else wants to join in with me, apologize to the residents who were impacted by this. You know, I didn't go do the burning, but this is our city. And to some degree, that means I think that we have some responsibility about really upholding those who we feel have been harmed. And so my apologies to them. I also will say I'm heartened by the response of a number of our residents who have just said this isn't going to stand and you're not going to change our behavior. And I think we as a city government can say the same thing. You're not going to deter us from the work we're doing. So please, you know, if you have something to say to us, say it to us as elected representatives. Don't engage in violence in our community. And then I also wanted to say a thank you to Dave Danoon, to Kelly Storch, to other residents who have done local media appearances to talk about this and really say, you know, this is what we believe should be what our community is like, and really have upheld that. So I'll stop. I'll get off my soapbox now, but I just really want the message to be, you're not going to stop us from doing what we're doing. So, all right. I believe we move to our topic. Mara has been waiting very patiently for us, and we're going to talk about code enforcement. And I don't know about the rest of you sitting up here, but this is probably the #1 topic in terms of resident and constituent contacts. So it would be really nice to have a full understanding of how all this works. So thank you. We're happy to have you here with us.
Thank you. So I was not here. Obviously I was out of town when you all started discussing it in July. I did re-listen to the video so that I could understand what had sort of transpired, what some of the questions were. I know our city attorney answered a lot of, I think, the basic questions. So I tried to just provide a few basic things, that hopefully can help generate some questions or answers that you might have had. So I started with a basic flow chart about how we address complaints. So a complaint comes in, and right now we are focusing only on complaints. We don't have right now the staff time to just be wandering down street by street looking for things. And we also really have talked about not necessarily doing that, focusing exclusively on complaints. Once the complaint comes in, we schedule an inspection because it is something that we have to document ourselves. Because if it eventually has to make its way to court, we have to have someone be there to be the witness, to have taken the photographs, to have seen the violation themselves in order to process it through that thing. Sometimes people ask us, well, can't I just send you pictures? I took a video. It needs to be our own visibility so that when we have a staff member in court, that staff member can document and talk to the judge about the matter. If we go out there and we can't see something. So sometimes someone will tell us about something that's in the backyard, tell us that we can see it from the street, but we go to the street and we can't see what they've asked about. Or if it's something where they believe it's a violation, but it's not truly a violation of the code, we'll close it in our system. If there is truly some sort of infraction, we'll send a letter. The letter then has a certain number of days that they have to come into compliance based on the type of infraction. So I'll go into another slide that talks about some of the timeframes for the various infractions. But once that letter is sent, anywhere from 1 to 30 days, depending on the type of violation, have to come into compliance. The 1-day ones are where we go immediately on site if it's a very important one. So someone's left a refrigerator outside for pickup and they've left the door on. That's something we don't wait and send a letter and have someone take care of later. If within those 30 days or however many days they were given, they come into compliance, we close the item. If they have not come into compliance within that time frame and they haven't called us asking for additional time to come into compliance, they are sent a court summons. When we go to send that court summons, we are required to have a minimum of 30 days before we can put them on a court docket. So sometimes that violation letter is 29 days before the next court date, which means that they can't go on the next court date in 29 days. They have to go sometimes almost 59, 69 days later. If they get that court summons and in the time frame that it takes to get to court, they come into compliance, we can potentially talk with the prosecutor and say, go ahead and dismiss. Sometimes it's just for court costs. Sometimes it's dismissed completely. If it isn't able to be dismissed, it then goes through the court process. So I have another slide about the court process and some of the infraction types. Before I move to anything else, any questions about this?
Few questions, Mara. So first, why is it that the city needs to self-document? Why can't we use neighbors as witnesses in order to proceed or to prosecute a complaint?
So that'd probably be
Supreme Court rule. So, and again, part of it is that you have to have someone who has firsthand knowledge if you're going to issue a summons, if you're going to prosecute them, because it is a prosecution. It's a quasi-criminal prosecution, but it is a prosecution. So if someone sent a picture, how do I qualify the picture? How do I know when it was taken? How do I know exactly where it was taken? So I have to have someone who's got that firsthand knowledge in order to testify and make that record.
And once, so I understand, like, say it's in the backyard and it's not observable from the street. Can the city, if the neighbor consents, enter on the neighbor's property to document?
most definitely. We just make the neighbor aware that then the complaint can no longer be anonymous. And a lot of people prefer to remain anonymous. They don't want to, tell on their neighbor. And it's pretty obvious from the documentation that we've gotten into their yard and been able to see. But yes, a lot of times we're given permission. We have in our work order system a place where when the complaint comes in, if they've given us permission to get on their property, we have a yes or no question. And then it opens up a dialog box so we can put the address of where we've been given permission to access to be able to see something in the rear yard.
So I think one of the concerns that I get, and I think this goes to the definition of what compliance means, but for instance, we see recurring issues that, for instance, like cutting grass is an easy one because you can cut the grass, but within the next month, it's now 2 feet high. And that's the same issue that was initially complained of. So it's a recurring issue, but they've come into compliance in the interim and then they've let it become uncompliant or non-compliant. How and what can the city do to rectify something like recurring issues that in the interim can become compliant?
We just keep going out. We have to start all over again.
So is there grass is an easy one, but is there a spectrum of compliance?
There is. It can be really difficult. We have neighbors who complain about, storage of items in the backyard. And there's always that fine line between what's your preferred garden decoration versus what someone else might feel is a piece of junk. And so there is that fine line, and we go through documentation of trying to find the section of the code that applies most correctly. And sometimes neighbors are not thrilled that certain items would not be considered storage of, trash or junk or things in debris in their backyard. There's also a lot of sections of the code that give a little bit more leeway on at what point does it become a detriment to the property.
So is there an analysis that the staff does before it heads to the prosecutor in regards to the equity part of this? And in other words, an individual that is being issued a citation or a summons, if that individual is deemed or determined to be of insufficient means to rectify the issue, is that taken into consideration by the staff? So for instance, I think an easy one would be like, shingles hanging off the roof, which is non-compliance with our code, but the individual that owns the property does not have sufficient economical means in order to rectify the issue. Is that taken into consideration, or is that a judge-determined issue?
I think in most cases, it eventually becomes a judge-determined issue. But if we do know of someone who has issues with means, who've stated it to us, we do try to put them in touch with the various organizations that will provide additional help for yard care or other maintenance. So we do try to do that when we can.
When the summons is issued in a situation, regardless of the situation, whether we know that they have means or not, is the issuee, are they provided guidance or information that, hey, just contact the city and we may be able to provide you resources or contact in order to get the financial help that you need?
So you're jumping all the way to summons. It takes sometimes quite a while to get to summons. So if we get that first letter out to them and we've sent them that letter, our contact information is on the bottom. We do get people who call all the time saying, I need this much time. I've got this going on, or I've got that going on, or it's a dead tree that you have to take down, and that can be very expensive. And they'll talk through with us about needing additional time or needing the ability to save up to take care of something. And we will work with them on that. So the summons part, many times, even though it shows that we're kind of going through quote quickly, we don't always go through quickly because we are trying to work with the residents. If they contact us, we want to work with them. If they ignore us, we just take our regular steps that we would have taken.
I mean, is there internal regulations as to like the discretion that is afforded to staff?
I'm not sure what the question is.
So in regards to whether we proceed to a summons or whether we continue to give them more time to come into compliance, is there what kind of discretion or guidelines are afforded to staff in that discretion?
So normally they sort of make their way up. So if my code enforcement officer has been asked for, 2 months' time, she would then probably go up to the building commissioner and say, hey, this person's asking for 2 months' time. That seems like a lot. Are we able to give them a certain amount of time? There's certain code sections that give us additional timeframes, not necessarily for violations, but for other means. So we always do go back into the code and see, if you're needing to get a permit, there's a certain time frame before you come out of compliance. If you're needing to, it'll probably go when we get to the infraction types. Different infractions give you more time to address them because they need more time. So a lot of times that amount of time, if someone says that they can't cut their grass, that's, something that we don't say, well, you can have a month on that. But if someone says we're working on this item or that item, or if there's an issue, it's a derelict vehicle, they haven't been able to tow it yet, or they claim that it's another family member's who's dropped it off. They don't have means, they don't have the key, we work with them on that. But no, there really is, it's sort of like they kind of make their way up to me at some point. And at a certain point I say, well, we really have to get it to, the judge can give that ability to give additional time. We also don't determine fines. That's determined by the judge. So the extra time that can be given by the judge and the fines would all be addressed in the court.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to follow up because it's a similar question. And I think I'm asking exactly the same thing in sort of a different way. And that is, what's the criteria for granting an extension? Sounds like there's a financial component to it. There's what's in the code. There's what the permit process might look like in terms of how far. Is there anything else really that you can think of that might play into that?
Time of year. So, someone has a violation that's their house has peeling paint and they're supposed to be painting the house, and we're getting into a cold spell, or there's an issue related to, we'll give them options for putting up silt control fence and putting some straw down to get you through a time because you can't put some sod down or the seed. So there's certain things that will give some flexibility based on time of year, and a couple other things like that.
Thank you.
And I'd say they have to reach out too.
Oh, yeah.
That would be like another consideration.
Yeah, right.
Quick question. What's the best way for neighbors to lodge the complaint?
So we have multiple opportunities.
And are all of them fine?
Yes, all of them are fine. You can call the main number and ask to report a complaint. You can do the Fix It form, which is an email that has a couple places where you can fill out and it goes directly to City Mail. You can also just send a general email. You can make a general phone call. You can walk into City Hall. So sometimes people don't want the trail of an email or a piece of paper. We get anonymous things in the mail constantly. We get little pieces of paper left for us in mail, and through the mail slot, things like that. So all of those means, all of them go into a work order system. And then based on the type of violation, some violations don't go to us. They might go to the police department. They might go to Public Works. And some of them are very confusing as to where they think they need to go. In addition, we're currently getting a new portal in place where you'd be able to put the complaint directly into the magnet system, which is our computer tracking system, where one of us doesn't have to re-enter the data. You'll enter the data directly and it'll go into the system. And we're in a beta version right now, and we're doing some final work on that one.
Thank you.
And complaints can be made anonymously.
Yes. So if we complaints can be made anonymously if we do not have to get onto someone's private property to view it.
And if I submit a complaint with my name, do the individuals that are alleged not to be in compliance, do they ever learn of the individual that submitted the complaint?
If they do a sunshine law request for the documentation, they do have the ability to see what was entered into the work order system.
Gotcha. Thank you.
How does the person who has complained follow up? Is there a way for them to?
So right now it's calling in just to check and see, or emailing. Sometimes we have people who just kind of email asking for whether they're in compliance yet. The hard part is the staff time to constantly be answering those when we're trying to also be out there and enforcing it. In the new system, there is a way that you can check on the status of something, but the status would simply be like violation sent, court status, some of the basics. And a lot of times that's kind of what we have. We'll say, we sent the violation on this date, or we might have a note that says they've asked for an additional 2 weeks. But we try to put all of our notes into the system so that no matter who answers the phone call, they should be able to look into Magnet and see at least the basic status.
And what's the volume? How many complaints do you have in a certain period of time?
So I did look back, and our numbers are a little bit different again than we've had in the past, but I looked back for 2022 and we had just under 900. That does include, I will also tell you, that does include, we do put in, if we find someone who has, a lot of times we get people who are purchasing a house that they're just trying to do some renovations and sort of flip to someone else. If they don't have an occupancy and permit and inspection, that goes into the system, because monthly we get a list from Missouri American Water that has new water turn-ons, and we'll send a letter if someone has a new water service and they haven't gotten their occupancy. So that does include some of those. We track them in that system too. It's not a huge amount, and I'll have a slide in a little bit at the end that kind of shows you the spectrum of the ones we have. Right.
So Mara, how many code enforcer officers do we have?
Right now, one.
Yeah. I mean, because right now it seems like we're doing about 2.5 complaints a day. On average, at least based off of the last year. I mean, are you in need of additional staff?
We had to.
Hesitation concern.
Well, no, we had to. And that second position is currently frozen with the budget.
So, I mean, I guess my question is, do you think you'd be able to operate better if you had additional staff?
A second one would be easier because we used to have it split down the center. We had one code enforcement officer dealing with one half of the city and one dealing with the other. Now we've got one. And so Travis has been in his free time helping to, when we have days where that we get too many complaints in, or trying to catch up, because the code enforcement officer also does our occupancy inspections and our follow-ups for occupancy.
Well, and that I was going to ask about the occupancy too, because I know that they're responsible for that. And I know that you and I have discussed occupancy permits. And obviously there's a difference between, I think they're called the same thing, but like obviously to make sure that there's safety issues versus whether you just sign up for your occupancy permit. Now, are those distinguishable for the code enforcer? Like, are they responsible for going out to the home when someone moves, just merely
So when someone is going to sell their property, they call and schedule that inspection. If they, we right now are pretty booked out because again, we've got sort of the one officer. So right now we're booked out probably 3 weeks out. She's doing 3 a day. And then she has to go back. So like if someone's not in compliance and needs to call back in and say, hey, I put up my smoke detectors, I've fixed that one outlet, and I've secured my handrail. She then has a certain block of time that we do the re-inspections, and we try to get those in pretty quickly so that she can do re-inspections. So she kind of focuses her, we focus the occupancies in the morning with re-inspections soon after that. And then she deals with code enforcement in the late afternoon.
And code enforcers not necessarily have to be called by someone while they're out cruising the neighborhood. If they see something, they stop and make a code enforcement as well, correct?
Yes, but not as much as we used to. I mean, it's got to be a pretty obvious one that we're addressing, but we're focusing on neighbor complaints right now.
All right.
So the response time, is there, so what, is there an expected response time, or it's surely based upon volume and capacity?
We're working on volume capacity. We try to get to them within 48 hours. If it's something that's more important that we really like, they're parking vehicles on the grass in the front yard, and we hear that it's something where they're doing it sort of during the work day because they're working on a project or something. We try to, if it is time sensitive, get someone out immediately that same day. And sometimes if I'm short on that, it will be one of my 2 building inspectors or the plan reviewer will go out into the field and deal with like a stop work order or something that's a safety violation.
Assuming that we are unable to provide additional staff to complete projects or to complete the requirements that your office is dictated to do right now, is there anything within the code that you think, hey, this is antiquated or unnecessary, and therefore it should be removed, therefore lowering your capacity, or you're lowering your burden as a office? Or is there anything that the city can do proactively in order to address neighborly concerns?
So for your first question, I'd probably need more time to think. Yeah, on the fly, I don't know. For your second question, you know, a lot of the concerns that people have about their neighbors is related to them not talking with their neighbors. So, I mean, if there was a way that neighbors would talk with each other, I think there's a lot of hours that would not be spent by the city. But I don't think there's anything we can do about that per se. I wish neighbors would talk with each other a little bit more and try to work out solutions to some of the things, because a lot of it is really just, you know, sometimes one neighbor will complain, and then because that neighbor complained, they'll complain back against their other, and it just becomes this back and forth where we're addressing properties side by side.
Yeah. I see, this is just anecdotal. I've seen some cities throughout the country, they've instituted like a citizen complaint board where the citizens determine the level of the complaint and what the next procedures are, and they work with the individual that has the complaint issued against them to determine, hey, how can we as a city and also a community create a better atmosphere? I just find that equitably interesting. I don't know if I think if anything, it would create more work for your staff because it would be a whole nother board, but it's an interesting way of resolving, I think, issues in a neighborly / community forum.
All right, let's go.
So Mayor, before we move on, this has been a really
So close.
You're so close, not quite there. So it's an interesting conversation, and food for thought for later, but in terms of the staffing, it's also about setting reasonable expectations for the community when we talk about what can we do. Because when I hear Mara talk about the response time, And then Councilman Franklin, when I hear you ask, would it work better with more staff? If our response time average is 48 hours, that in my mind is not an unreasonable expectation for somebody either lodging a complaint or expecting occupancy follow-up. And true enough, they're used to it was one day. People would call and get same day service. So there is certainly a change in that, but I'm not sure that the 48 hours really constitutes. Is that where we put our priority? And I'm asking this in terms of strategic planning as we move forward. So I think that's interesting conversation. The second piece is equity, because true enough, previously the city was divided and people would go out and look for complaints, which a lot of cities do. There were, using the word complaints a lot of complaints about that process as well.
Yeah.
So with having the one, it certainly is not a perfect system, but are we doing things more equitably? And then I think the real key piece that I don't know that anybody around this group is going to be able to solve is it's amazing the number of complaints we get where people just don't talk to their neighbors. And so that really is an issue. And how we solve that one, I'm not so sure. But anyway, as we think about, is it working and would it work better? Perhaps it would. Perhaps it's working the way it should.
And I'm not advocating right now that we increase staff, but I do think that the paradigm of these complaints needs to be turned on its head and we analyze it, whether there's a better way of doing it than what we've done for the last 100+ years in regards to complaints and inspections. I don't know what that is, but I think it's an interesting thought process to think about how can we create a more community cohesive result-based approach as it relates to complaints rather than it being punitive.
So the punitive nature certainly, in terms of can we do things better? Absolutely, every single day. I think one of the things that Ms. Perry didn't dive into, but she touched on it. It's even how we're using magnets. We've been having a lot of internal meetings across departments about how we're using it. Is magnet the perfect system? I don't know, but it's the system we have. But even allowing people to input their own complaints and for follow-up, the staff, both on whether it's public works, front desk, Ms. Perry's staff, they spend a lot of time re-entering those things they get from the note slots, from the phone calls, that sort of thing. And we don't want to necessarily lose that personal customer touch either, because it's great when people can call and they can get a staff person. But if we can drive people to the system to actually input their own concerns, that in itself is incredibly valuable.
Absolutely.
And I think we need.
Is that up and running yet? I thought she said that was under construction. Is that up and running?
It's in beta version, which means we're testing it out with the different staff members. We did a beta test. We were talking about it like a week ago. And we found 4 or 5 little quirks that we want to ask them about and some fixes, but we're getting very close.
All right, let's let you go ahead and proceed, because I think also part of the perception of our residents is about what we get to control versus what we're subject to from the state. So please continue.
So just briefly, we have a lot of different infraction types and timing. This little image off to the side, which is all kind of muddled, but we have like a 2-page sheet that's our cheat sheet of what the code section is that the violation is, kind of what a summary of what it is, because there's different sections depending on, there's a different section if you have a vehicle that's on private property that's licensed, but expired, unlicensed, derelict. There's a whole bunch of different sections. But just for example, we give 1 day for dirt and mud in the street, open burning refrigerator doors. Those are things that are quick, immediate. We would talk with them directly. We give 5 days for grass and weeds over 10 inches, for garbage, debris, trash cans that are in the street that were supposed to have been taken back in after trash pickup. 10 days for derelict unlicensed vehicles, not having occupancy, a stop work order, stagnant water, furniture outside, as in someone has their couch in the front yard, sump pump discharge, something where they've got an extra pipe where they can immediately make that, it doesn't require a permit to bury something. And then no trash service. So canceling their trash service, and now the trash is sitting outside. And then the 30 days are for larger stuff, dead trees, limbs, providing ground cover to an area that has gone bare and is now sort of mud from rain, replacing roof, sidewalk, gutters, scraping and painting. Again, this is not the all list, but I just wanted to give that example. And again, we try to give reasonable amounts of time.
When you say you're giving reasonable amounts of time, to do what? So the 10 days, is that till?
Their initial
summons?
letter gives them 10 days, and then that's where we're supposed to, we say in the letter that we will go and check the property again to see if there's compliance. And if there isn't compliance, we're going to give a summons.
Gotcha. Thank you.
The next thing was just to show you sort of the, we send a courtesy infraction notice. It has the code section that they're in violation of. It talks about what is the thing that actually happened. Like in this case, grass, weeds in excess of 10 inches. It talks about the date that they have to correct the violation, the date that we're going to go back. If you have any questions or concerns, it has the officer's phone number and email address. And then it also has the right to appeal. So if someone says, hey, I don't believe that I'm in violation, they can also send a letter to appeal that. Instead of coming into compliance, they can appeal, ask us, tell us why they think they should not have had a violation letter, and we can address that. I know I'd heard on the July one, we send it to the owner of the property and the tenant in both cases, because sometimes it's the tenant has the violation, but it's technically the property owner that has to get the letter. But by sending it to both, we sometimes get better compliance. The property owner information is per St. Louis County. So we do have to look at county. And lately there have been a lot of delays in getting the proper information from county. So if it has changed hands and county hasn't recorded the new person, we might have to start over because we didn't send the proper notification. Also, the other big problem we've been having is with an LLC. We're supposed to send a letter to the organizer that's on file with the state of Missouri, which is different from the registered agent. And sometimes the organizer and the registered agent are the same. But a lot of people will protest that if we sent it to their registered agent, that's not the proper person. So we've had a few fights in court over saying that their LLC was not properly notified and they should not have to essentially come into compliance. So there's been a few things with that. And I know we've talked with the city attorney about this one and ways to potentially solve that.
So I'm going to put a place marker on that. That came up today in the Legislative Affairs Municipal League meeting. And apparently there have been a couple of county municipalities who have managed to force compliance on that and have not yet been sued. So I'll fill you in on what I know.
That's good. Operative words, not yet been sued.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of like what the city of St. Louis is doing right now in regards to anyone who rents property, what they actually have to submit to the city. Whether the constitutionality of that's going to be upheld, I think, is a question, but it's an interesting issue,
Right,
as we look at solutions.
right. But the key word there is notice, and that's really the important thing, which is why I think even though these things do exist, I think that a person is not ever prejudiced by notice to the agent or the registered agent or the organizer. As long as they've got actual notice, I think you might have an enforceability issue, but that hasn't gotten far enough for us to really know that. So I think it's actual notice that we have to give. And so that's been defined by the courts in other places, in other ways. And in this instance, I think that the LLC would be hard pressed to say, I didn't get actual notice when it went to your registered agent who has an obligation to notify you of just that anyway. So,
Yeah.
Interesting.
I just did couple little pie charts to help understand sort of some of the breadth of things that we get. So you'll see that in 2022, and if you start at the top in the little light blue pie shape and work your way around, that matches as you go down. So the first one is unfit for human occupancy. Next one is vehicles and trailers. Next one after that is water discharge runoff. After that, site concerns, so like permits not pulled and other issues with the site. The next one is dead trees, limbs, and vegetation. Next one after that, grass and weeds. Next one, which is blue, dark blue, trash, litter, rubbish, storage, permit, occupancy permit and inspections. And then the very last one, which is in the big gray, which it kind of fell off, I think, because of the font for the 2022, but it's the same in 2022 and 2023. The one that says other, that is sometimes where we have 4 different things all at the same time on the same property. So we've got a complaint about storage and tall grass, and a dilapidated fence and a derelict vehicle. So that other becomes a bigger piece because sometimes it's multiple problems on the same property, or it's just in general a really weird other something that we don't really have that doesn't fall into any of those other categories. So the 2022 data, that's the just under 900 complaints. The 2023 is January through August. You'll see we've had quite a few more unfit for human occupancy, quite a few more dead trees, limbs, and vegetation. Same thing with grass. That was a huge one because right after the no mow, we got a whole lot of complaints about tall grass. And then you can see the trash litter, rubbish and storage kind of went down a little bit. I'm not sure why exactly, but that's only through August. And we usually see a lot more trees and grass and weeds in the summer. So it might even itself back out by the time we hit the end of the year. And then I think, my last slide was just on court
Can I ask
process.
one question? about the
Yes.
previous- What does unfit for human occupancy mean?
We have,
Because the complainer is only looking at the outside.
so we get complaints where people are complaining and telling us that the house is vacant or that there are certain issues with the house that we don't have the legal right to go in and determine. So usually the unfit for human occupancy is a combination of 2 different things. One is unfit for human occupancy because there is someone living in there. It's a hoarder situation. We might have been called in by the police or the fire department, and we have to document that for being unfit. The other is when we get a complaint. It's vacant. There's a certain issue. If we are looking, sometimes we're given permission to get on either side to see the rest of the property. That one can be a lot harder because we don't have legal access to get on the property and determine if it's unfit. We would have to get a administrative search warrant from the judge to be able to get on the property. We do that usually when we're starting a repair or demolish hearing for a property.
So I don't envy you, Mara, because you have to balance multiple constitutional rights here of people, not only the due process rights, but of the right of people to own property, and then the right to people live in their neighborhood without issue. So, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the public has to recognize that these 3 rights have to be balanced in some form or fashion. We're trying to do our best in order to do so. It doesn't mean that we can't change things, but it's a tough balance to create.
Yeah.
One more just question. Again, I think I know the answer to this, but one of the most recent emails I've received, and it is not an unusual statement, is, quote, "I guess South Webster has been forgotten again." So given that we're working on resident complaints, that seems to suggest to me that the geography is a matter of who calls in. So is there any differentiation within your office about where in the city and the timing of your response to those complaints?
No, we get the complaint in, we try to then schedule it on the various schedules. If it looks like it's getting too busy, like Tommy already is like 3 days out, Travis will then try to go out and, like this morning, he went out and covered 3 or 4 ones that had just come in right before the weekend. Because we get a lot over the weekend. The work orders come in on Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Yeah.
And so those we are a little bit harder because we're trying to squeak them into the rest of the schedule.
All right, thank you.
I do have a quick data question. I'm just curious about the other category and why you wouldn't just count that as one each of the 4, break it into the 4 categories and make it more something more
Yeah,
accurate.
so actually it's funny that you say that. Maybe 5 or the reports that my department used to give used to, before we had the system that we had, our code enforcement officers, when they came in each day, would tick off like what ones they had, and then count them up at the end of the month and then add them to a little spreadsheet of like how many we had. And so the numbers were really, really high. And I couldn't understand why we were in, like over 1,000 or something in different, and it was because every time they'd go out, if they went out to one property, they were counting it under like all the things that they documented. And so it was almost counting like it was like 5 different instances. And really it was,
So it's by property, basically.
it's by property.
Call.
Yeah, by the call and by the property.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment really quick because I think Laura brings up a very apropos issue as we look at the Charter Review Advisory Commission's, our board's recommendations. This idea that somehow we have split Webster into 2, I think really we need to disabuse residents of that idea that we somehow segment money. And that's just because we are elected at large, somehow we are neglecting certain parts. I grew up in South Webster. I currently live in South Webster. I've never felt like I've been neglected by the city. And I'd like to understand better why people feel that South Webster is somehow neglected more so than others.
So I will tell you, probably in the last 6 months, I've had someone tell me that, the western side near, I'm blanking right now. Now the park, Larson Park. I've had people tell me that we're ignoring Larson Park. I've had people tell me we're ignoring everyone in Tuxedo Park. I've had people tell me we're ignoring around Blackburn. We on a regular basis have wherever you're living, that's where usually we're deficient. And we understand, again, we're trying to, when we get the complaint in, when someone says, all my neighbors have complained about this property, I'll go into the system and I'll look to see, and I'll either have like 1 complaint or no complaints, because they all believe their other neighbors reporting it to us, and they aren't necessarily.
I gotcha.
Or I get in the opposite, like I'll get 1 complaint that we can't get onto the property and see, and then it'll go onto the Community Connect, and then like 5 people will all tell me that there's a problem with a property. And then finally we start getting people giving us permission to be able to see the property. So it goes both ways. The last slide I have is just a little bit about court process. So that's a ticket off on the right-hand side. Housing items are in court on the first Wednesday court date of the month. If someone doesn't show up to their date the first time, it's usually extended to the next date. So let's think about this. If only 29 days have passed, I wasn't able to get them onto the next court date. They're on the court date after that. They don't show up for court. The judge lets them go back to the next month. You're now looking at almost 90 days from the point we've sent them the summons to court. In addition, if the violation eventually gets to warrant status, we need to have pedigree to confirm that that person being given that summons is actually the person. So if you have a John Smith, it might just get kicked out because we can't prove who that exact John Smith is. And then we have to start all over again with letters from the beginning. So we do try to work with that. We do have access to a system to do some checking on pedigree, but doesn't always help. And then the last thing is just the court can find them and they cannot be in compliance. So let's just say the guy says, yep, I'm in violation, I'll pay the fine. If they pay the fine and then court is then done with them, but it's still not in compliance, we start the process all over again. So we start with letters. And we've got a few properties like that too.
What's the old adage? Justice is never swift.
So what is the ability or inability of the judge to increase fines for non-compliance over time?
So I know Senate Bill 5 has a limitation. I know that there are some things that we don't always do, but have the ability to do, which is, it's based on the instance, the summons. Technically, if they're continuing to be not in compliance, you can send them a summons every single day. We don't do that. But that is, I think, the one thing we've been told is that you could technically send them a summons every single day.
Which is going straight into the trash can.
And can you please define the term pedigree?
Oh, pedigree. It means that we have like a birth date, driver's license number, something that definitively ties to that particular person. So that we don't mistakenly send a summons to the wrong person.
Thank you.
All right, are there other questions for Mara? Would you mind at least sending this to me? I
I'll
need to
send it to Katie.
put on my bulletin board your flow chart so I remember everything. All right,
This is
thank
very
you.
helpful.
Thank you very much. All right, we've got some board and commission decisions to make. Brian Bergfeld interviewed for the Historic Preservation Commission, which has 2 vacancies. Would we like to appoint Mr. Bergfeld?
Yes.
All right. Dr. Grace Lee, this is just an announcement, has been named the school board member to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Good. Carol Dunkey, who has served 1 term on the Architectural Review Board, wishes to be considered for reappointment.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Another announcement, Bud Belomo is the Chamber of Commerce representative for the BDC. His term has expired and they have reappointed him. Eric Bowring, who has completed a term for a member who resigned early, has served about a year. He wishes to be considered to appointment of a full term. Very good. Yes. Yep. Suzanne Indelicato completed a term for a member who resigned early. She also has served almost a year. She wishes to be considered for appointment to a full term.
Yes.
Good, okay. Look at us rolling along. Katie Krieger was completing also a term for a member who resigned early. She served about 2 years on the Parks and Recreation Commission, and she wishes to be considered for reappointment.
Yes.
Okay. And then just 2 announcements. Katie Friedman Miller, one of the original appointees to the Police Community Engagement Board, has resigned. So there's an additional opening there. And CC Bartels, who has served on the Business Development Commission very ably, is not seeking reappointment. So we'll be working on that as well. Katie, would you just, when you're ready, let us know which BDC? CC was was a resident appointee, I believe. You don't have to look now, but at some point, yeah, at some point, because,
Yes,
it says here we have 1.
She
and
was a business owner.
She was, okay. So does that mean that the
Connected
position
brand.
that we are interviewed, John Sauter for is the one that CC's vacating?
Yes.
Okay, now I
And
understand.
the other person that'll be interviewing.
Next
on
week's,
the
okay,
on the
excellent.
19th is also would be a business owner.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, I believe that concludes our business for the work session. How about if we take 3 minutes, I say, and you'll really take 5, and then we'll get on to our regular meeting. Ready to go? All right, we are recording now, so we can start this process. Welcome to the September 5th regular meeting of the Webster Grove City Council. We welcome your input, your comments at the appropriate time, which would be for the remarks of community and visitors. If you would like to make a public comment at that time, please fill out a comment card. We are also having and they're available over here on the table. If you are on Zoom, you'll use the raise your hand function at the appropriate time, and we'll look for that. We do have 2 public hearings today, and so if you'd like to make a public comment during those public hearings, you'll have an opportunity to do that as well. I think your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. That's the one thing that I left out there. So we will start with the roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss.
Here.
Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander. Is there? Yes. Yes.
Councilmember?
Councilmember Alexander, can you hear us?
Okay.
We'll come back around
Yes,
to
we'll
that.
come back around. Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Our first order of business is the public hearing, and that is levying and establishing the rate and annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2023 by the city of Webster Groves, Missouri. And while I wish we could do that with the library tax all in one, we're going to have to take these one at a time. So that is officially opening the public hearing. Our director, oh, now I forgot what your exact title is, Mr. Donovan.
So fiscal planning and performance manager.
Our director, our manager of fiscal planning and performance is here today to share with us about our annual property tax rate. So please go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just going to go through the process and explaining to everyone how property rates are assessed and show you what the rates are going to be for, or at least what our current pro forma is for this coming year. So real property and so real estate is determined, is appraised every January 1st of odd years. So we are in an appraisal year. Personal property is determined every single year. So is commercial property. The vehicle market values that are used are determined by the National Auto Dealers Association Blue Book, their October issue. So the current vehicle appraisals are based on October of 2022, and they will be redone in 2023. And once the appraised market value has been determined, the assessor calculates the percentage that is to be based on their classification and to arrive at the assessed value for particular property or personal property. So these are set by the state. You can see here the classification percentages. So residence is assessed at 19%. So if you were to take the example of a residence that has an appraised value of 100,000, just to make it easy, at 19%, that would mean that they're assessed for taxes at 19,000. And then you take that number as an example, and you would divide that by 100 and then multiply it by the tax rate or the real property levy, excuse me, and that gets you to your total property tax bill. That's how that is calculated for folks. And here we have the assessed valuations for the current year for the city of Webster Groves. We have the 2023 compared to the 2022. And then on the right-hand column, we see the increases. So residential property went up 14.38%, commercial property 6 and 6.62 respectively. And then we have the different taxing districts, which have slightly different tax rates. And so we take a look at them and for their particular valuations. And just for a note, Crossroads doesn't have any residential. So that's why there's no residential property there. That's why there's not a residential assessment. So stop so far and see if there are any questions with what we've gotten so far. If not,
Questions? All right.
okay, so let's go into the actual levies. So for general operations, this year our tax rate is 0.160 compared to last year, which was 1.72. And then you can see the street improvements at 0.103, pension at 0.151, and the debt service has gone down to 0.199. And then in the districts for the residential, Old Orchard has gone down to 0.301, and Old Webster has gone down to 0.166. And then there's also the commercial rates, which are 0.183 for general operations, 0.118 for street improvements, 0.190 for the pension, 0.199 for the debt service. And then the commercial rates for Crossroads at 0.258, Old Orchard at 0.253, and Old Webster at 0.165. And then the personal property rates, with the exception for debt service, have not changed, and debt service is at 0.199. So all of these rates are calculated by the Missouri State Auditor, and they give us a pro forma back in terms of what we can levy for the year. And so that's the property tax rate. So that's what they came back with. This will go through the valuations. They are going through the, oh my gosh, I just forgot the term, sorry. Board of Equalization, excuse me. And they'll go through the Board of Equalization, which is meeting right now. And so the assessed values can change if they make a different assessment. And then we would go back to the state auditor and put in the new valuations, and they may give us a new rate as it relates to that.
I think it's important to note, because we always hear the complaint that we're raising taxes. I think
Correct.
this clearly indicates that the city of Webster Groves is not raising taxes. And you can thank the Hancock Amendment or thank whoever you want. The difference is our assessed value continues to rise. So if you see
Correct.
an increase in your tax bill, it's because Webster Groves is becoming more valuable.
That is a great point. So the assessed value increases every year. And so the residential assessed value in particular goes up. So taxes, what you have to pay increases, but what the actual take, if you will, or what comes into the city, the tax rates go down so that it balances out. For the Hancock Amendment prohibits us getting a windfall. So if taxes, they've gone up 14% and change. If they were to have gone up even more, the Hancock Amendment says, well, you can't just benefit from that, so the actual tax rate decreases.
But that's all in the aggregate, right? So that some individual homeowner, if you see a significant increase in the value of your home, you will see what seems like a
Correct.
huge tax
Absolutely.
increase, but that's not because we've changed our tax rate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jake Zimmerman's available for a phone call.
So here are specifically just kind of highlighting where, again, the money goes for the city of Webster Groves. The debt service being at 0.199 is 32% of the actual tax bill that the city receives. General fund at 0.16 is 26%, so that's gone up a little bit this year. From 25%, which was last year. Street improvements at 0.103. And then the pension being at 0.151. And so that's increased as a percentage of the tax bill just a little bit. And the total being 0.613 is the total tax rate as the share of the broader city property tax.
And I know we have this later on, but just to say it out loud, like this is how the taxes that we get in the city are
Correct.
distributed, but not all of the property taxes come to the city. Which
That is
the
correct.
latest slide.
Yes. And we have that in 2 more slides. So this just is our historical trends and it just demonstrates graphically the continued decrease in the tax rate as we go over the years. As the valuation goes up, and the Hancock Amendment kicks in, it forces us to lower our actual tax rate. So that's demonstrated here. And then to Councilman Hicks and Shepherd's point is that the city of Webster Groves only takes 9.2% of the actual property tax. So if we look at this, which was in 2022, the city only received 9.2 cents on the dollar for the property taxes. 56.5% of that goes to the school district. The Webster Grove schools, rather, the special school district has its own at 14%. And then you can see all the different other entities that have a portion of the property taxes that our residents pay. So this is an example of a residential property, what you would pay and to whom. So this was taken directly from Zillow. If you had an appraised value of 392,696, you get the assessed value 74,612. Your total property tax living in the city of Webster Groves would be almost $5,600. But what actually comes to the city would be $512.59. So you see that the majority of that in the left-hand column, a full $3,150 is going to the school district, Webster Grove School District. Here's the library's assessed
So,
value.
so
Oh,
we need to finish the public hearing,
Oh.
right? Am I right about this? For the city first, and then we'll do the,
Did we
do the
jump in the
library,
library?
do it all
Okay.
over again. Are there any additional questions for Mr. Donovan? Okay, do we have anyone who'd like to make a public comment on the tax rate for the city of Webster Groves?
Can we put this online, particularly this, okay, excellent.
Okay, then I will,
Hands up, real quick.
No hands up.
no hands up, then I will ask the city attorney to enter any items into the record.
So I would move for the introduction of the PowerPoint that has been prepared by Mr. Donovan and discussed this evening,
All right,
as well as the code of the city of Webster Groves.
as always.
As all,
And the applicable ordinance.
yes.
Bill.
Okay, and
We
so
should start adding things.
I'm gonna close the public hearing before that starts happening. And then, Council Member Hickson Shepherd, will you call for the first and the second reading of Bill number 9233?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9233.
Second.
Bill 9233, first reading, an ordinance levying and establishing the rate of annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2023 by the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, and repealing ordinance 9192.
Any questions or comments? Second reading, please.
Bill 9233, second reading, an ordinance levying and establishing the rate of annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2023 by the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, and repealing ordinance 9192.
All right, we will move on now to the public hearing for the Webster Groves Public Library. So this is levying and establishing the rate of annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2023 for the Webster Groves Library District. I officially open the public hearing, and Mr. Donovan, you may continue.
Thank you, Mayor. And on the next slide, well, here's the slide, municipal library, the current valuations versus the prior year valuations. So residential being at 671,286,050. And you can see the rest there. So this is for the library, and then the library tax rates, residential 0.194 and commercial 0.226, and then personal property at 0.315, which is that one is unchanged from 2022. So those are the rates for the library. And as you can see, again, the continued decline in the property tax rate as it goes historically for the last almost 10 years. And something that we will be providing to all of our residents this fall will be the opportunity to go on to our website and to using our Balancing Act software, and they'll be able to type in their appraised value, assessed value, and the amount of their property tax, and then get a breakdown of exactly where that goes in relation to the city. And this tool is actually pretty nifty. I got to see it demonstrated for us at a conference, and so it'll break it all down, and we can drill down as far as we want, or keep it general. But it'll provide the opportunity, and this is a real life example from the city and county of Denver, that what they use, but it'll show exactly where the dollars go for your particular property tax bill and break that down. So good visualization. So if there are any questions for the public, obviously there's plenty of information on our website. We have both the budget, our finance department, as well as the fiscal 5-year fiscal plan, and plenty of resources there for people to look at and pros. And this PowerPoint is already up and running on the website on the property tax page.
Great, thank you. Any questions on the library question for Mr. Donovan? Do we have anyone who would like to make a public comment about the Webster Groves Public Library tax rate? Right. Then I'm going to ask the city attorney to enter items once again.
I would move for the admission of the PowerPoint prepared by Mr. Donovan and spoken of this evening, as well as his own testimony as a witness in this matter, and the code of the city of Webster Groves. Katie, did I miss anything?
Thank you very much. That closes the public hearing. Councilmember Franklin, could you call for the first and second reading of bill number 9234?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9234.
Second.
Bill 9234, first reading, in ordinance, levying and establishing the rate of annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2023 for the Webster Groves Library District and repealing ordinance 9193.
Is there any discussion? Second reading, please.
Bill 9234, second reading. In ordinance, levying and establishing the rate of annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2023 for the Webster Groves Library District and repealing ordinance 9193.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to remarks from the community and visitors. And first we have Mr. Justin Miller. Please, I hope I read your name properly here. If you'll just come forward, give us your name and your address, and then have your 3 minutes to tell us what you'd like us to hear.
Certainly. Justin Miller, address is 720 Fairview over in Tuxedo Park. Go ahead and get started in my 3 minutes.
Please go right ahead.
So first of all, thank you guys for your time tonight. I appreciate it. So the reason why I came in originally was a selfish reason. My family has been very privileged in order to take advantage of the golf cart scenario that happened in Webster Grove. So I appreciate that scenario that happened. It actually got me looking. The police officer that provided the permits had us access a website that actually gave us the ability to look at speed limits around Webster Groves and where they change. So originally this came down to just the ability to take my family to different places, but there were two areas that I wanted to bring to the council's attention that I thought were a little concerning. And I will pass it around as far as these two areas. It's chicken scratch, bottom line. They're in rectangles, but one area is actually going from Big Bend at Lockwood, so Big Bend all the way over to Glen, which is actually right past Webster Groves High School and right past the library. For some reason, the speed limit is set at 30 miles an hour in front of also Holy Redeemer too. And then for some reason just slows down to 25 as we get towards business district. So there was a kind of a misunderstanding as far as I didn't understand from a residential standpoint why that speed limit would actually increase around our schools, as well as areas that have a lot more high traffic. The other area is over at North Glendale Avenue that runs right parallel to the Recplex. Also a very highly trafficked area, very residential, just as the other one is. But for some reason, that one stretch is also 30 miles an hour rather than 25. So again, originally this was more of a golf cart scenario, and it's turned more into, I'm not understanding why the speed limits were set at 30 in highly trafficked areas versus 25 for those specific areas. And I wanted to bring it to your attention.
Thank you very much. And just, you know, it's our practice not to have this be a conversation, but I'd like to have a follow-up with you.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. Thank you.
our second speaker's card is from Mr. Dave Buck.
Is this a duet or a trio?
Okay, I've been a resident of Webster Groves for 23 years. I'm happy to pay the taxes we do. And I think everybody that moves to Webster knows that we pay a little bit higher taxes than other cities, but it's totally worth it. And it's worth it for the school district, and it's worth it for our excellent city services. And at the top of my list, no offense to Jen, Public Affairs, no offense to Mara at Planning and Development, but police and fire are at the very top of my list. What? Oh.
So everyone in the world can hear. So
I would just like to say, you fought your fires and saved many lives. Protect our families of children, husbands, and wives. As for mistakes, You've made a few. You've stared danger right in the face, but you've always come through. And you go on and on and on and on. You are the champions, my friends. And you'll keep Webster safe till the end. You are the champions. You are the champions. No time for losers, 'cause you are the champions of Webster World. Thank you, guys. You guys do a great job.
Now, are they assigned to go back and sing that to their peers? Right, thank you. Does anyone have any new business here? Council members, city attorney, city manager?
No, ma'am.
All right, then we're gonna go to unfinished business. Councilmember Bliss, could you call for the third reading of bill number 9232, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of bill number 9232 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9232, third reading. An ordinance authorizing the appropriation of $682,900 for the purpose of defeasing a portion of the city's outstanding general obligation bonds, paying certain costs of such defeasance, and authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith.
Are there questions or comments? All right, let's have the vote then, please.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
She said
Yes.
I see. Yes. Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to new business. We are lucky to have with us the outstanding chair of the Charter Review Advisory Board, the Honorable Jeannie Kirkton, who's going to come and give us a little update about the work of the Charter Review Advisory Board and give us a preview of what we can expect to receive from them in terms of a report.
Oh, thank you, Mayor and Council, and no way I can top Dave Book. Before I get started, I want to recognize two of my teammates. Joe Dugan is here and Matthew Heil, both board members. So this is not your final report. This is a view from 30,000 feet. Eric, could we move? Yeah, so what we've been up to for the last 11 months, we've met twice a month or more. We formed subcommittees for very complex issues that needed more research, like the wards, council compensation, how we were going to arrange our public engagement events, and then finally for the putting a new article in the charter for public engagement. So we've done that. We reviewed the input that you and staff had recommended, and we have gone through the entire charter, section by section. We tracked and prioritized our proposed changes, and we sought public input through SurveyMonkey. We had about 340 responses to that. We held listening sessions with community members that are active in the community, and also with Webster Groves boards and commission members. We had a public open house on August 9th where 41 people attended. And on August 22nd, is that me?
No, you're fine.
We voted on 26 proposed changes. And before you all faint, in 1965 was probably the last comprehensive review of the charter. There were 21 amendments that were put forth to the voters and were passed. So now we're up to beginning to draft our final report to you. But I thought you would be interested in our open house. Some of the items, these are the ones that garnered the most responses. We put little sticky notes on the boards. Adding model city charter values to the preamble got mixed reviews. It was interesting, the at-large and ward and hybrids, people liked all three of those. The council compensation, yeah, it's time to address this. In 2001, the charter review recommended a increase, but the council voted it down. So here we are again. As far as legislative proceedings, there is throughout the charter, there's some pretty outdated practices and language. Mimeographs, posting at the library, things that aren't done anymore. So we chose to insert instead language that things should be published in contemporary means of information sharing. And that keeps the charter flexible and adaptable to the times. Some people wanted us to spell out we should use PDFs, but then again, you're very prescriptive and they may not be around in 10 years. So, and then there was some, people did not quite understand the sunshine law and the 24-hour notice. They wanted 7 days or more. That's not practical and it's not state statute. So, in Article 4, administrative services, I think people were unaware of the historical nature in the charters that city managers do indeed head departments. Article 5 is finance. There was concern about extending the due date past the 45 days at the June 30th. And of course, the data, the financial data needed to do those reports is not available that soon. Planning and zoning, the name change to planning and development, the adoption of a comprehensive plan and regional coordination with other localities. Had a lot more concern of support than concern. And but some people thought it gave the Plan Commission too much power, but they're an advisory board. So, and then Articles 13 and 14 having to do with elections. It's a minefield. There was support for bringing the charter language into compliance with election law, which was good to hear. Some people wanted no change. They wanted us to leave it alone and not do anything. There was registered voters versus ballots for petition signatures. And some wanted to raise those percentages. Others wanted it to stay the same. And I will tell you that even as a board, we are stuck on that and we'll probably be revisiting that at our next meeting. And finally, the proposed new charter article was based on the model city charter, putting in public engagement into the charter. Some people were good explanation point, other is too vague, and the others, no way, don't put it in the charter. So, and these full comments are available online, so they're interesting. And the final report to you, sometime in October, probably you'll be getting this. And to me, it's just not a report, it's a historical document. It's a blueprint for whoever follows us. I wish we would have had this. And it's also a public record. So what you will get is an introduction and our methodology, all the process we went through, the subcommittee reports, the informational presentations that we looked at, our public engagement methods and results, and all the materials that we went through for the past 11 months. And then you'll get recommendations and commentary from us. And then finally, if CRAB members have comments that they want to leave, and any correspondences we've gotten from the public will be included as well. And so essentially what I want to tell you is that we've updated antiquated language and procedures and brought the charter language into compliance with law and our practices. So it's overwhelming, but I think they're all positive, good changes.
And council, if you would take a minute, especially and look at what is going to come to us in the report, if there's anything that you want from the commission that you don't see up there, now is the time to say so, because they're going to start if, I'm sure actually some of you have already started working on sections of the written report. And I don't want us to, as council, be in a position of getting a report and going back to them and saying, well, we need X, Y, and Z. So just let's, believe it or not, I'm gonna ask that we pause for a moment and take a look.
Representative, I was just gonna say that, you know, this has been, something very important to me to see through to the end, and that, we have a charter review advisory board. And despite the naysayers that said this was in create division and animosity in our region or in our community, I think it's done the complete opposite. And so I want to thank you as a leader, but also applaud and commend and thank the entire CRAB. I think that the expectations I had, you have far surpassed. This is truly unbelievable. And the amount of deliberation and discernment with which you guys have discussed these issues, I think is pretty remarkable. And I think it shows democracy at its finest.
Thank you very much. I will say that it's been a very interesting process, and we're not a monolithic group by any means. And so we've had some very good discussions, and I think we've come to a good product that hope you'll like it.
Well,
This looks so
please go ahead.
comprehensive. I mean, I'm really trying to think of what wouldn't be captured in here. I mean,
Okay.
it's got like the history, the methodology, like you said, it's like a, it's a historical document for the next charter review and whenever that happens to see what you all did, which is a ton. And I really like the idea of including the recommendations that aren't being recommended as well. Like we talked about these and we tabled them for whatever reason. So I'm very happy with that plan.
I will just say this, I have been lost in my head about how we as a council are going to consider all 26 recommendations plus any additional recommendations that members of the council can make, because remember, we can do that as well. And I will beg or lay down the law or whatever I'm allowed to do. And, we really need to start by that October 17th council meeting. And so if it is all possible for the commission to get us that, I'm looking at you two out there. Get us a report to start working with at that point in time. That would be great. Otherwise, I'm not sure we're going to make our ballot deadlines in a way that is thoughtful as, because frankly, I want us to be as thoughtful as you all have been, because there are two words that I think define this process and going to these meetings. One is thoughtful, but the other is thorough. I mean, they literally have looked at every single word repeatedly in the charter. And I think that is, as David said, beyond expectations. All right. Well, then I will thank you very much for coming. And just so council knows, we're working on a proposal for our process as a council. And once we have something that looks like it might make sense, we'll share it with you all so you can shape that as well. But we really do need to get started in October. And rather than go through some sort of marathon session, it, in my mind, makes a little more sense for us to do this in pieces, which has been actually modeled by the commission itself, is to look at the different kinds of pieces we might have. And then I'm also going to ask that we, maybe as soon as that first meeting in October, talk about how we're going to do public engagement as a council. And if we're going to have an event, that we can go ahead and schedule that event so that we know we can be there. We have plenty of time to make the public aware of that as well. Because again, the commission has modeled public engagement for us, I think, extremely well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I want to,
And, when the report comes, hopefully we'll get, everybody to show our appreciation in some way. We'll figure out something anyway.
I forgot, I want to thank you for being our liaison, and Katie for digging up stuff that we need, and Eric and Dr. Peoples and Neil for your help along the way. So thank you.
Mayor, do we know the drop dead date to be put on the ballot?
I do, and I will send it to you when it's on the tentative schedule that I've put together, but, they're going to be relieved to know that I no longer believe we can start October 5th. So I don't want to give anyone of you, heart palpitations or anything like that. So, all right. So we now come to a very nice point in our new business section. Number 2 here, the designation of our deputy city clerk, Shella Bradley, who we just met in the work session. Welcome again. And I believe I need a motion.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move that we designate Shella Bradley to be our deputy city clerk.
Second.
All right.
Lots of seconds.
See, I mean, I'm not even sure I have to ask for discussion. There were so many seconds. I do want to take this moment in time for the public or whoever. Shella's name, if you looked at it, you might pronounce it a little differently. Shella, I'm going to ask you, if any of us make that mistake, we will welcome any correction that you would like to make. And hopefully we're all going to get it the right way. All right. So then let's have a vote on this.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right. I know. Yeah. We should have a round of applause. Councilmember Smith, would you call for resolution, consideration of resolution 2023-36?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the reading of resolution 2023-36 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Resolution 2023-36, authorizing the city manager to enter into agreements with the Federal Emergency Management Agency and State of Missouri Emergency Management Agency for receipt of grant funding and purchase of 2 properties identified as substantially damaged, repetitive loss, flood-affected properties.
All right. I'm assuming we don't have a formal presentation, but can we have an explanation about why we need to do this today and exactly what we're doing for the public's consumption?
Absolutely. And if there's any follow-up questions, I see that Mara has stayed here with us. So we are a step closer in being approved for purchase for the buyouts for the 2 repetitive loss homes. It's unknown when FEMA/SEMA will make those final decisions. This really allows me to be able to, excuse me, with council's permission, to act once those next steps become evident. We're unsure of the timing of that, but depending on how council moves forward and allows those funds, that is what this will allow us to do. And before you move, do we have any update on time frame? You don't have to get up, just yes or no. Okay.
In regards to these 2 properties, if we were to approve this and it goes forward, that does not mean that this council has to approve the non-repetitive flood damage properties, correct?
That's correct. It's a completely separate action.
And what is the cost to this, the estimated cost to the city in regards to? Oh, sorry. What's the estimated cost to the city if we were to proceed and approve this and then eventually get the grant money?
For the 2 repetitive losses?
The resolution is limited to the 10% cost share, so the manager cannot execute if it's not the 10% cost share or less. 10% would be about $58,000,
And how much did we allocate into our special fund?
500,000.
Holy cow.
All right. So voting for this resolution essentially means proceeding with the 2 repetitively damaged homes at the buyout limited to the 10%, which we think will be around $58,000. Discussion.
So
If
what are
we
the
looked at those,
unknowns?
do we know?
Go ahead, Karen.
Go ahead, Karen.
So I know when we looked at the 6 properties before, and there are a couple of those were rental properties. Do we know which of these properties, if either of these are those rental properties?
Councilwoman Alexander, I do not, do you want to? Thank you.
If I remember correctly, the one on Forest was a rental and the one on, I'm flipping them.
You are.
The one on Pacific was a rental and the one on Forest was ownership.
And I can confirm the Forest because I've talked to the homeowner several times.
Yes, I was flipping the 2.
So is that either one of these?
Yeah, one of each, one rental and one ownership.
Sarah, go ahead.
I was just curious. It seems like there's still some unknowns. I'm not clear on what the unknowns are. So the timeline is a big one, correct? For the, like, if we approve this and move forward, it just means that whenever the funds are like, because they've said they're coming now, right?
So not necessarily.
Okay.
And thank you. So there was some
Good
initial.
question.
It's a great question. There was some initial confusion with the press release because we weren't alerted that the press release was coming out. And so I took that to mean that that had been approved. It had not. It's just went to a higher level of review. So there is still the possibility, and I don't know how many levels of review there are. There apparently are a lot. There is still an opportunity that they could not be approved. Don't think that that's very likely considering that FEMA put out the press release and has moved it up, but it could still happen.
But the percentage won't change?
The percentage will not change.
Okay.
So does the city buy these properties?
So the city would be purchasing, the land would be deeded essentially to the city. And I would ask Mara to come back up. You may remember it's now been well over a year since planning and development did these presentations for us, but nothing has changed. If we become the landowners per se of these two properties or any of them, should we get to that point, we are restricted on what we can do with that land. And the restriction is great. Essentially, it will be open space, sanctuary type land. Is that correct?
Grass only, no improvements, no hard surfaces.
And they're both though directly adjacent to Deer Creek Park.
They're directly adjacent to Deer Creek. So just additional open space.
And who's responsible for taking the structures down and?
It would be us. So that's, Travis worked out in the application how much the cost would be. It includes the demolition as well as some of the staff time and some other things. That all gets integrated into the total number. And then the 10% is the total number of all that work.
And so it says in the press release that the projects will remove these structures from the floodplain and return the lots to natural grade. What does that mean?
Essentially, there will not be, like, if there's a basement, which I think they both are slab. I apologize. I'm getting them confused. We have 6 of them that we're dealing with, and some did have basements. But if there is any sort of crawl space or basement, that we will restore that properly to what it needs to be for the floodplain.
So it won't be raising the property up.
No.
Okay.
And the other 4 properties, what is the status of those? then?
So those are that one step behind. We've
Okay.
finished everything with SEMA. We're waiting for SEMA to tell us that they will send it to FEMA.
Mhm.
So the other ones, the 2 are, we finished it with SEMA. They let us know they sent it to FEMA. Then FEMA sent out the press release. So it's sort of like a couple steps ahead of where the other one is.
So we would be prohibited from creating an ordinance that says if you're in a floodplain, then you'd have to build your house on stilts.
For these properties.
Oh, for these properties. So we've had this conversation with a couple people who've asked to purchase some of the properties, in particular, not these 2, but the other 6 that are at question. And we've confirmed with SEMA, if someone decides to purchase one that we have on our list to go through the process to be purchased, that person can build something on stilts. But that's for the ones that have not gone through the buyout by the city. So I've had, one of them is on the market right now. It's in the list that we've sent to SEMA, but it's on the market. So I keep getting these phone calls from people saying, well, I just want to renovate it. Well, if you do, you have to lift the whole thing up to 1 foot above the flood elevation. So in most cases for that particular property, it's 8 to 9 feet out of the ground. So we've been explaining that to people about what they need to do and what that would mean and all the impacts on that. But if someone should buy it and then it continued through the process and they weren't the original person asking for it, they're not going to get any more money. They can't now come back and say, well, I bought it for 20,000 more than what you're going to offer for me. They can't get what they paid for it. It still continues through the paperwork that we initially filed.
But the prohibition, say we go forward with this on these two properties, the prohibition on creating improvements to the land carries with the land regardless of the owner.
The land stays with us.
We can never sell it.
I'll have to check on that. But my understanding is the land's supposed to stay with us and we cannot develop it.
Public, it's held in the public trust through the city, so it's a requirement of the program.
And when you say no park services, does that mean it can't like officially be added to Deer Creek Park?
No, it can be added to the park. You can't put a field on
Oh.
it,
But it
like
can
a,
be maintained.
yeah,
as
it can't
part
be a
of the park.
sports field or adding, different things that could be impacted by a flood.
But if we don't go through this process, then a homeowner can purchase this land and build a house on stilts above.
And just as a reminder, which is what I tell the people that call, that number of feet above the ground also includes you can't
Have a parking garage underneath.
right. Yeah. So, I mean, the floodplain does allow you to have, so for those that know the one that's on stilts on Kirkham. So because that's 1 foot above the flood elevation, they do have their car in there because of the location of where it is, but like all their services, all their storage, everything has to be above that 1 foot above the flood elevation. So even though they have a garage, they had to have areas where water could go through, and then everything, all the services, HVAC, water heater, everything had to be raised up within that structure.
So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with these two because of the floodplain being so high. It's going to be difficult to build a house. But at the same time, if we take possession of this property, we can't really do anything with it.
Grass.
I think also it's important to keep in mind, though, that these are the two that have been designated as repetitively damaged, so we can expect them to be damaged again.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
That's why it changed to the 10% match, which was much, much smaller for the city.
Because before it was 25. Right.
Correct.
That's the rest of the properties that are.
The other properties are a 25, and that's the lowest it'll go. They'll evaluate that, but that's the lowest it will go would be 25.
For the remaining 4.
Correct.
But these are at 10. So FEMA has basically said their buyout would be 90. If approved.
Sorry, repeat that again?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, council member.
Okay. So
Yes, 1910.
All right. Is there additional discussion? Yes, Dr. Peoples.
Thank you. So while the resolution is certainly here for council consideration, if there are still questions that you would like answered, this is not time sensitive. There's not an emergency that it has to be done tonight. We do not know when FEMA will act. So perhaps I shouldn't say it's not time sensitive. Maybe we'll get a memo tomorrow, but we can always have another meeting or an emergency meeting. So I just want to put that out there. I do not want council to feel rushed into making this decision. If there's more information that you want, we're going to receive the same answers that we've had from FEMA or SEMA, but we're happy to ask again.
And I think part of the reason for putting the resolution on our agenda, just so council knows, is that it's a little bit unpredictable in terms of what kind of response time we're allowed from FEMA and SEMA. And so it's just, means we're prepared for whatever they're.
I appreciate your being proactive in trying to get this moving, because it is technically been stagnating for a while. And so for those people that are waiting, I think, just out of our own personal consideration of what they've been going through, that it would be nice for us to consider this in the near future.
Is there anyone who objects to us going ahead and voting on this tonight?
Okay, so I need to be, what our vote is saying, we will continue with waiting to see what the final decision's gonna be by.
So the vote would be to authorize the city manager to engage in the buyout of these two properties in cooperation with FEMA at our 10% cost share. If the cost share changes, they have to bring it back to us. If somehow any of the terms that FEMA has change, they come back to us. But this just allows to move forward on those 2 repetitively damaged houses. All right, I think. then I'm-
Meaning we are committing to buyout.
Yes. Assuming that FEMA follows through with what they have indicated in the press release, we are committed to buying out these 2 and only these 2 properties.
At 10% at a cost of $58,000.
Correct. And I want to be clear, no one has to vote for this. There are 2 options in voting. You can vote for it or against it. We do not have to be unanimous on any of this. So my question just was if people are comfortable going ahead and voting tonight, or if there's specific additional information that we might find necessary. I'm going to take silence as assent in that particular case. And does anyone have further discussion? All right, Katie, let's have the vote.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Peer pressure's off.
All right. Is there anything anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda? All right, Councilmember Richardson, could you call for the approval of the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Second.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
All right, we've made quite a few appointments to boards and commissions. Brian Bergfeld has been named to the Historic Preservation Commission. Dr. Grace Lee to the Parks and Recreation Commission as a school board representative. Carol Dunkey has been reappointed to the Architectural Review Board. Bud Belomo has been reappointed as the Chamber of Commerce representative on the Business Development Commission. Eric Bowring has been named to the Business Development Commission for a full term. Suzanne Indelicato has been named to the Historic Preservation Commission for a full term. Katie Krieger to the Parks and Recreation Commission. That's it. And we do need a closed session
Yes, ma'am.
under 4.
Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed section related to negotiated contract, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens, 12, close parens.
Second.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
All right. Does Councilmember Alexander have another Zoom link? Okay, so
Yeah.
we will let you rejoin us. Thank you all for being here this evening.